I had a very flourishing career. And then I had, the crash and burn from alcohol and drugs, and plummeted my career, and basically lost everything. Functioning addict and alcoholic for quite a few years until the very end when it all came crashing down.
Yeah.
And when it all came crashing down, I went literally from running the state of Indiana for one of the largest companies in the world, almost like overnight, to losing everything and ended up in a homeless shelter. And I lived in the homeless shelter for 10 months, and I had no money. I had nothing, zero. I'd lost everything.
So you went from a high earner, 6 figures.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Overnight.
And so I ended up in the homeless shelter, and the agreement was I got my room and my board, and as long as I agreed to work 38 hours a week for a not-for-profit that owned the homeless shelter called the House of Charity,
okay,
and for $1 an hour, and I lived on $38 a week. So I worked in both the food center and the shelter, and lived there for 10 months, and had a really crazy experience there. When I got there, I got a roommate. So I'm living in a tiny little room. The room I lived in was probably about half the size of this room. And there were just 2 single beds and a sink and a window.
Okay.
And so I got there.
Not too unlike a prison cell.
Right. And my roommate was a guy named Mario. And Mario was a Colombian guy who turns out to be, he was a Colombian drug cartel guy. And he was in the homeless shelter doing the same work I was doing, but he was there while he was awaiting trial, and his lawyer thought it would be a good idea for him to do volunteer kind of work while he was awaiting trial, it would look good for his trial. And he was a major drug smuggler, a major cartel guy, cocaine smuggler. And so I lived with Mario for a couple of months. He had a couple of more months before he had to go to trial. Now, our beds were about this far apart because it was just this tiny little room with 2 single beds in it.
Yeah.
And after living with him for a couple of months, Mario wakes me up literally at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night, and he's like, "Hey, Art, get up. I got to talk to someone." I'm like, "Mario, it's 3 a.m. What do you got to talk about?" He goes, "No, seriously, get up." So I sit up on the side of my bed, and he sits up on the side of his bed. Our beds are so close, we can't even sit facing each other because our knees would hit,
Yeah.
And so we had to sit with our knees next to each other. Yeah, it's we had to sit with our knees next to each other. It's so crazy. And Mario proceeds to tell me, he says, "You know how everyone thinks I'm going to trial for drug smuggling?" And I said, "Yeah, we kind of know your story." And he's like, "Well, that's one of the charges, but the primary charge is murder." It turns out that Mario stabbed a guy to death, stabbed a guy 20 times in a drug deal that went bad. And he was going to trial for murder. That was the primary charge.
You certainly never hear about 20 stabbings when a drug deal goes good.
Yeah, right. And you start to think, now all of a sudden this guy just told me he stabbed the guy 20 times. That's not.
And you're this close to him.
Yeah, right. It's not like shooting someone at 50 yards. That's up close, personal, violent, rageful. And so I don't even know, what do you say to a guy when he tells you he stabbed somebody 20 times? I'm like, yeah, all right. Want to play a game of chess? I don't know. What do you even say?
Yeah.
So I was freaked out. I mean, now I had to live with this guy. I mean, here I am. I'm this Jewish kid from Connecticut, living with this murderer. So after a couple months, Mario went to trial. He didn't stab me. He went to trial, and he ended up getting 19 years in maximum security federal prison at Stillwater, Minnesota. And so the day he left for trial was the last time I ever saw him. That was
He's
it.
out now.
He must be out now, but he actually, not only did he get 19 years, he got 19 years with a letter of deportation. So when he got out, he was immediately deported back to Colombia.
Well, that doesn't mean anything in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
He'll be back.
Yeah, who knows, right?
He's
That's
back.
true. That's true.
Hanging out in Minnesota.
Yeah, that's true. So I spent 10 months in the homeless shelter, and then when I got out, I just started putting my life back together. I was really, really fortunate. I became really successful again.
Was there a first step, or was there a breaking point when you're like, enough's enough?
After he told me that he was a murderer, I remember rolling over in my bed and thinking to myself, man, what am I doing? I got to make some changes in my life because, I'm living in a homeless shelter. I don't have anything. I'm literally making $1 an hour, living on $38 a week. Something's got to be different. So I really, I really got into recovery and AA and went to tons of AA meetings and got sober and made a lot of changes in my life. And so, I think that that most people in recovery get to a point where they just say, you know what, like, I'm going to do it different. And I think a lot of people, whether you're in recovery or not, there are a number of people who get to that point where they make a decision they're going to do something different. Like something's got to give, and I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to do it different. And